coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
Hello everyone, welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast. I say welcome, I'm not sure welcome is the right way. Let's endure this together. Game over is the phrase that comes to mind. We're doing this just after the Palace game, and that which was a shambles. Shambles is the word that very much comes to mind about that. It's not just me, I am Matt H. With me is Pete. Hello Pete.
Hello Matt, I'm thrilled to be here.
But it's jolly brave of you to come along quite frankly. Matt V is not able to. He hasn't weaseled out of this. He did tell us some time ago he wasn't really able to make it, but he's passed thoughts on, shall we say, and we'll come to those later, and hopefully he'll be back with us next week. Normally, as you know, we go through the games as they've happened over the week, and we did play West Ham earlier in the week, but I think after that Palace performance, while it's still raw and you know, fresh in our minds, unfortunately there will come a point in years to come when we maybe forget about this game, but let's get on with that first. I mean, it's not about the game, it's not only about the game. This game to me encapsulates so much that's been going on this season. So in case you've missed it, Arsenal have just lost 3-0 to Palace. We're quite lucky to get nil. Just an appalling performance at any level. I mean, there was no redeeming features at all. But what made it worse, I think, as I'm alluding to, is it's so similar to everything else we've seen this season. Yes, we've had the odd bright spot. Yes, we have somehow made our way to a cup semi-final. But this was just appalling. Pete, I'm running out of whatever the opposite of superlatives are in terms of the bad stuff. Where would you like to start if with this one?
Well, what have we learned this week? And I think the answer to that is there's a big difference between West Ham at home and Crystal Palace away. And however well you play against West Ham at home, when you look fabulous, and well, certainly in the second half you look fabulous. And will the real Mesut Ozil and Granit Xhaka please stand up? Because after being, well, excellent, to be honest, against West Ham, particularly in the second half, they were both dire tonight, as was everyone else. The other thing that comes to mind is, would we, if we had the chance, swap Wilfried Zaha for Theo Walcott? Because Walcott just wasn't anywhere to be seen tonight. And Zaha was everywhere for Crystal Palace. Well, not everywhere. He was on the right-hand side on the wing and playing brilliantly. They look for him all the time. He beats men, he has a trick on him, he has everything. And although his stats in terms of goals and assists may not be quite up there with Walcott, you get the feeling that he's probably involved in games much more than Walcott is. Who else can we be rude about? Mustafi, I mean, his panicked defending tonight was just frightening, wasn't it? I mean, he was putting in ridiculous tackles on Benteke in the first 10 minutes and was booked after about 20, I think, and it was just precisely the opposite of what we saw against West Ham. Gabriel was great against West Ham, possibly getting man of the match almost. Again, tonight didn't look anything like that, didn't perform anything like as well. Welbeck still, you know, what I can understand actually. I mean, I don't disagree with the starting lineup. You would think that after a really good performance against West Ham, you would think, right, okay, you've shown us what you can do, go out there and do it again. So I think it was sensible to start with the same lineup, but they just let everyone badly down.
Well, you make a lot of good points there. I mean, when you said for a second there, would we swap Walcott for Zaha? For a second, I thought there was something going on. That we, yes, was my answer to that. I would swap Walcott at the moment for a washer dryer. But that is not necessarily to criticise Walcott hugely, because he didn't see any of the ball tonight really, and then you wonder, well, is it up to him to go and get it? Is it up to the others to get it to him? Everything was coming down the Arsenal left. Now, I think one of the reasons for that is our one bright spot tonight. Someone who I think I've said good things on here about before. If not, I've certainly said it to you, perhaps, off the pod and to other people. Is Monreal? I think is always someone who looks busy, always someone who looks like he's getting involved. And if we're just talking about tonight, he might be one player I would just about pull out. I don't think I would blame Martinez for any of the goals being conceded either, but I may be stretching there, in terms of looking for not high points, less low points might be the way to put it.
He had a chance to save a penalty and didn't take it.
He did. I mean, it was a good penalty, wasn't it? It was put in the corner, but
none of our keepers would have saved it. So
no. And Matt previously has talked about Cech and his lack of penalty saving. So absolutely, yeah, he was no worse than perhaps the alternatives. I mean, I've got a few points. I know we're coming at this slightly randomly today because it's of what's happened and how it's happened, more to the point. But I look at that team and agree that it's pretty much the first 11. But even if it's not, even if it was your ideal first 11, I'm really not sure on the performances, not today, but over the last few months, we could even say a couple of seasons, there are many, if indeed any one of those players who would get into any of the top 5, 6, 7 teams. I mean, obviously Ozil and Sanchez are the two that people talk about. But
I'm not sure either of them would, really.
I mean, obviously, perhaps last season, Sanchez, looking at a different player. But this season, I'm not. When you look at the talent that there is there in those other teams, much as I hate to say it, and dare I even say it, down the road, Seven Sisters Road, would they take any of our players now? Any single one? I'm really not sure they would. And to me, that's pretty damning.
Yeah, maybe Bellerin.
Maybe Bellerin, but not if he plays like he did today, which was headless chicken.
No, exactly.
And you've got Sanchez giving the ball away again, as we discussed, I think last week, or certainly discussed previously. I've got some points. Let me see if I can go through them in some vaguely coherent order. Carrying on the Ozil Sanchez theme. I mean, they were just peripheral today, and Sanchez was out on the left. Now, maybe he's been told to do that, and this is where we don't know who's taking responsibility, who's telling people where to go and what to do. You've got to look at the manager ultimately for that, but when the players get across the line, are they doing their own thing? I mean, there's no responsibility was another note I had. There's just the ball is coming into the Arsenal box, and players are just looking at each other, waiting for someone else to get away. Palace could have scored 2 or 3 more, but you've got Benteke in there, for goodness sake. I mean, all right, he may blow a bit hot and cold, but you don't leave a guy like him, and look at your mates to go in there. You just stick your foot in, don't you, one way or the other, and get involved. Sorry, go on, Pete.
You certainly would expect it, wouldn't you? You would expect some sort of responsibility to be taken when, as you say, you've got players like that in the opposition side. You've got to look after them, and everyone just goes, oh, well, can't be bothered, let's just hope for the best.
I mean, they look beaten almost before they start. I mean, our first chance was El Nene's shot in the 8th, 9th, 10th minute. But I was already worried at that point because Palace were already looking the better team. And it's not just they're the home team, they start the first couple of minutes quickly. They were already looking more organised, like they had a plan.
Yeah, they certainly they were doing a very good job, I thought, of pressurising us in the midfield. So we couldn't actually play through the midfield, and we were trying to hit long balls and find Walcott, etc., and failing miserably, I think. And when we did get anywhere near, someone tended to give the ball away. But their plan worked very well in those opening minutes. That's the thing, wasn't it? They did very well. And restricted us, and as I say, in those situations, you then need someone like Ozil or Sanchez to make the difference, and neither of them did.
No, and looking at the other end of the pitch, I mean, I've got some of the stats. We had 72% possession. We had 525 completed passes to Palace's 153, according to the stats app I was looking at. We had more corners. This is pretty damning, though, isn't it, to have all that?
The corners were awful.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is not a surprise, of course. We're pretty used to that. But to have that possession and those passes and those corners, and none of this is to belittle Palace, by the way, who did an excellent job. They defended well, they pressed well, they looked very dangerous on the break. Everything a decent team should be, and and that's not saying patronising, but a team that's not going to be top 4, top 6, you want them to defend well and break quickly and have the players who can take advantage. And Palace did that to perfection. But this is pretty damning for the way Arsenal have played for a long time, isn't it? We can, if we go back the 10 years, the 15 years to the pomp of the Wenger era, if you like, we were probably getting the same kind of stats, but you had the players who made a difference, and that's what we just don't have at the moment. We don't seem to, or if we do, they're not showing it.
Yes, or the players would know that even if things weren't working out earlier on in the game, that they could get into it. And at the moment, for instance, that had Hennessy not made what was a really good save from the early El Neni shot, that would have probably gone on to look really confident and powerful and gone and blown them away. But as it is, when we don't take chances like that, and that we're enjoying a dodgy part of the game, and the opposition having the best of it, that we don't look like we've got it in us to really to grab the game back from them, and that's what we seem to be lacking and have done for a lot of the season.
Yeah, well, let's try and put some structure to our ranting. I think we've been fairly polite so far, but I think we could be a lot worse. But let's look at the goals in turn. Yet again, it was an early concession. I was doing the coverage for By the Minute, and my update before the goal was, well, at least Arsenal haven't conceded yet, and which of course naturally meant that they were going to concede immediately. I mean, there's a little bit of luck in as much as Zaha slips when he crosses the ball, and maybe that takes the defenders slightly, confuses them slightly. But why is Townsend the first one to get there when there's plenty of other players around him? Why is he the one who's able to put it in?
And why is Xhaka trying to run across towards Townsend and the ball when Monreal's already going over there? Why isn't he trying to cover the middle, as presumably he should be? I do think there's one mitigating factor in that it probably was a foul on Gabriel earlier on. Benteke did have his arm over his shoulder, but it's not an excuse. But and referees don't give these as fouls, but it probably was a foul.
You're right. They're not given, are they? So, but you're right to mention it. But yeah, it's not really something we can cling to. And even if we could, Arsenal gave us plenty of other ways to be disappointed, because it was 1-0 at half time. I mean, I was then getting irritated the second half. Well, in general, but particularly with our only attacking strategy seemed to be against that well-organised, quite packed defence to either we'll pass it. It goes without saying, we're knocking it back and forth and left and right and left all the way through. Our only options then seem to be try and hit it down one of the wings, or just in the channel, kind of just inside the box if you like, or lift it over into the mixer, as it would have been called a few years ago. Neither of which we had the players for. Either our players weren't in the position on the outside, the ball would run out of play, or they would overrun it or something. And putting it into the mixer when you've left Giroud on the bench for the first hour is let's be frank, pointless.
Yes, precisely. You can't do that if you haven't got Giroud on the bench, and Welbeck isn't that sort of player. So what is the point? And we started the second half pretty badly anyway, or Palace started it well, whichever way you see it. They were all over us. They had a Benteke shot blocked by Bellerin. They had then he had it in the net from a rebound from, I think, a Townsend shot, was it? An offside, and that was all within the first 5 minutes of the game. And again, we just looked complete shambles. And you'd have thought coming out for the second half we'd be a little bit more prepared than that.
Well, you do. You hope that they're going to come out after half time and there's going to be some kind of reaction. I mean, we know from what we've heard that Wenger is not a shouter and a screamer. It's quite a rare thing. But you'd think they're intelligent people. They know things are wrong. They would take that 5-10 minutes to sit down and think, right, what the hell? What can we do differently? But yeah, absolutely no change at all. Palace came out firing, and Kabay then got the second goal. I mean, it's a nice finish. He may have not quite meant it, because he looked to lose his footing a little bit, but they deserved it. We
did make 2 substitutions before Kabay scored, of course.
We did. Which that's just clicked. Yes, which.
Made no difference. But...
Hello? Sorry, I was looking at the video of the second goal.
Oh, dear.
Sorry, deaf and dusty. What do you do?
Yes, and again, no mitigation, but he slipped, didn't he? Maybe it wouldn't have been quite so well placed a shot if he hadn't slipped and mishit it. But we were being overrun. It was typical of what was happening in the game, and Palace deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, just watching it with the same tone down that time. Sorry for that, everyone. I think if he did slip, it was sort of after he'd hit it, really. So I think he can get to take credit for an excellent finish.
And I think that was just following a moment where Ozil had the opportunity to shoot and hadn't bothered, and then had tried to find a pass in and had managed to give it away again.
Well, there was a moment where Bellerin was free on the right. On the few occasions he'd got free, and the ball came sort of floated over to him, and he just belted it wide.
Yes.
And that was a minute or two before that goal.
Yeah, but the Cabaye goal, basically, that was it, really, wasn't it? The third, they didn't really need it.
As I've said, and I said at the start of the pod, and I think I've already got the title for this pod, Game Over in more ways than one, because that wasn't just the game finish. That there's as we will come to in a second, I'm sure there's the bigger picture, which I think we already knew was in flux, shall we say? But I think that surely must have crystallised some thoughts somewhere. But we'll finish off the game first. Yes, 3-0, the penalty. Now, there was some suggestion that the penalty perhaps wasn't a penalty, but I couldn't blame the referee for giving it. I'll put it that way.
No, again, it's no surprise that the referee gives it in the same way as he didn't give the foul on Gabriel, he looking at it though, he does just stick his foot into the keeper, doesn't he? Or a mixture of the keeper and Bellerin, and then decide to fly over.
I think he gets that first touch just on the ball, so I think it's very difficult. Personally, just having not having seen it repeatedly, personally, I think it's difficult to argue too much against it. But yeah,
I think the point is, who cares?
Yes,
it didn't make any difference to the game or the result, other than we've got a slightly worse goal difference than we would have had. There you go.
There you go, indeed. So yeah, we'll move on from the game itself. Oh, sorry, did you have any?
Did you enjoy seeing Matthew Flamini doing some pointing and shouting for someone?
I made a point in the commentary of saying we could do with a number of Flaminis at the moment, because technically, yes, he may be slightly deficient. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean, no one's ever going to watch a Matthew Flamini performance and say, he did everything so beautifully. But they will say he did what he was supposed to do, and that's what we're not having. We don't have those people who get themselves involved, and that's the problem. And Flamini, you knew you were getting that commitment. Now, I don't want to simplify it to he got stuck in and that was that, but
Yeah. He'd have given away a penalty, but had he come on for us. But there you go.
Yeah, well, he may have stopped one or two of the other goals. So that's the thing, isn't it? But Flamini was a favourite of mine, certainly, particularly his pointing and shouting, and I couldn't even enjoy it today. I was that upset, so unfortunately I couldn't even enjoy that.
My other one question was, who do you think the "You're not fit to wear the shirt" chant was aimed at, particularly? Anyone in particular?
Well, yes. I mean, again, I mentioned this on the by-the-minute coverage of and it was very clear on the telly. I think it was just a general chant of frustration at everyone. But interestingly,
I think it was everyone.
Yeah, I think it was everyone. But interestingly, I made a note not long before. It could have been before, could have been after. I was getting so thrown by the end of it, I really didn't know. But I think we have a problem that the play. I'm sure all those players are nice young men. I'm sure they're very pleasant individuals. Arsenal players have been sort of, it's been said before that Arsenal bring up their players very nicely, and there's an Arsenal way and all the rest of it. That's fine. But as footballers, I think that the whole top to bottom, need to look at what we're doing with them, because there's just not that commitment. There's not that. Dare I say ability? I mean, I'm still not sure what the problem is, but whatever is in place at the moment is not working, so things need to change. And I just wonder if they are too nice. And I know I'm not the first person to say this by any means, but I suppose it's starting to sort of become clearer that maybe that's one of the things we need to look at. Do we need to win ugly? Do we need to do other stuff ugly? there seems to be this reluctance to drop people. There seems to be this reluctance to shake things up. I mean, I said in the commentary, I don't think many, perhaps I wouldn't say any, but I don't think many of those 11 should be in our starting 11 in August of this year for the new season. But I fear that if things don't change, most of them will be. And if that's the case, I don't think we'll see anything different.
I mean, I assume that should people get their way and we have a new manager next season, that manager won't be interested in having quite a lot of those players at this club.
But that's the if, isn't it? The if is there going to be, whether it's a new manager, whether it's a change in a fundamental change in culture, that's what I think people at the moment really aren't sure that's going to happen. Or do you think tonight will make a... Do you think tonight's finally tipped the balance?
No, I don't think so. I think what tonight has done is just pretty much put us out of contention for top four. Maybe to some extent that's a good thing. Maybe we want to be finishing outside of European competition for once.
Well, I did say I wondered if this was a very unpleasant way of a plan to avoid Europa League football by playing that badly in that game.
Well, you never know, do you? Everton are doing okay, aren't they? And we certainly increased the opportunity for them to... they didn't go above us on goal difference tonight, did they? But
I don't think so.
We'd have probably had to ship a few more, but we've certainly given them an opportunity to get in there above us, should we continue to play this badly. So,
of course, we might have to consider then what we want to do with the cup, if that's the case, because obviously that's another way in, which we might want to consider.
Indeed.
Anyway, we're being silly, a bit silly now, but I think we're entitled to some leniency after that.
I think that's what I mean. I think that's why I say that I think tonight's show we haven't got a prayer of getting fourth place now, because if we can play that badly against Palace away, a team that Wenger's never lost to,
that was until now. Yes, that's correct.
Until now, and that we haven't lost. We haven't lost to at all. For a very long time, and then and to think that we've still got to play Spuds and Man United for the end of the season and a semi-final against Man City suggests we've certainly got no chance of top four, and I don't think we'll be in an FA Cup final either.
I think they're both very reasonable points, unfortunately, and sensible points. But I did make a point, and I've lost it now on the contrary, about this being just a humiliating evening, and that was not losing to Palace isn't humiliating. Losing at all doesn't have to be humiliating, but losing in the way they played tonight is humiliating. And I think what makes it worse is that it's not a one-off. If it's a one-off, you can write it off as some weird, freaky thing. But this is the kind of thing. I think there will be a lot of people watching, a lot of Arsenal fans watching, before the game had even started, who might have had fears that this kind of thing would happen. So, for me, that's the worst thing, really.
Yeah, it's the fourth away loss in a row. We've obviously got a big problem, and although it looked as though there's a possibility we might have turned a corner once we'd drawn with Man City and beaten West Ham. This just shows that nothing has changed as far as I can see, really. So we're likely to have a pretty depressing end to the season.
Well, that's what a nice note to end that particular bit of the pod on. I mean, you're quite right. I cannot see things getting any better, and I think unless change is confirmed one way or another, and I don't know exactly what form that might take, but they've got to do something quickly to at least give that end of season a bit of a lift, because let's face it, wherever we finish now, whatever we do in the cup, people aren't going to be satisfied. They're not going to say, oh, that's all right, we'll carry on again next year. It's gone beyond that. I think that you're not fit to wear the shirt by the fans. It would be fascinating if anything comes out over the next couple of days if that was directed at a particular player. But that, for me, when I heard it, was like, that's just frustration at the world, if you like. That's frustration at the whole thing, the whole situation, rather than an individual. If it is an individual, then I'd be amazed they could pick one out, quite frankly. Which is why I think it was at everyone. It was frustration. It was the whole lot. I mean, obviously, I know the people who go to all the away games are particularly committed, and will be particularly disappointed, perhaps more than anyone else, about what they're seeing. But if they can pick one particular person out of that, I'd be impressed.
I think they just wanted to let the whole team know that they knew that was an utterly abysmal performance.
Yeah,
Not good enough for them as fans going to see them play, and hopefully the players will get the message, because I do think a lot of tonight is entirely down to them.
Well, that's a good place to finish that game. I mentioned what Matt says. Matt is unable to join us tonight, but he did send us some very quick thoughts. Were actually alluding to something you've just said, where he says it's disgraceful. The worst part is that none of them seem to care. None of them being the Arsenal players. That Zaha should have been subject to some more serious challenging after he nutmegged Ozil. He's obviously not impressed with Ozil's performance. Hopefully he's back next week, and we'll get him involved, and he can bring all his thoughts to bear on that, because it'd be good to hear from him. We will mention briefly, just to be consistent, we'll mention the West Ham game a week ago. That was a much more comfortable performance by Arsenal in so many ways. 3-0 win. They were losing, of course. Sorry, they weren't losing. They were 0-0 at half-time, and I wonder if there was a little bit of disquiet there. But then a pretty decent second-half performance. Pete, you were there. Rather than go through the goals or anything else, just very quickly, and you've alluded to this already, a decent performance. Everyone probably left happy.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good night, and it's part of what makes tonight worse. Really, is the fact that it was a good performance on whichever day it was, and the crowd were involved as well. It was a really pleasant evening all round. And as I say, there were some excellent performances, and you really did think, well, maybe they have turned a corner, maybe they've found a way to play together, maybe this is the real Granit Xhaka, the real Mesut Ozil, because they were both magnificent on that. Even Gabriel, there were some great performances all round. There were some lovely goals, and it's what makes, as I say, today even more depressing, is having just witnessed something that you thought, well, we know you can do this, and they turn in performance like that.
Yeah, and at least we had a captain all the way through the game, because what we didn't mention in our previous pod where we talked about the City game was that what was it? We didn't have a captain, or we didn't have anyone with an armband on for the second half of the City game after Koscielny came off. If I've got that right, which we got a slap on the wrist, I think, from the Premier League, but we didn't actually, have any.
I think we were fined £300.
A whole £300.
A whole £300, wow. I believe is correct.
Wow. Well, I'm saying that like it's not much to me. It is much to me. I'm pointing out that 300 quid is not much.
It would be to us.
It would be to us, but 300 quid is not much to the club, obviously. So that's something. All right. Well, look, we won't dwell on the West Ham game. It was nice to get those 3 points, but potentially meaningless, quite frankly, given that
meaningless.
Yeah, given we haven't got the 3 points tonight, and we know West Ham. I mean, they won it the weekend, didn't they? But that we know they're a pretty troubled team themselves at the moment. Right. Yeah. Well, we've been going for a while, so if we give everyone a break and a chance for a calming green tea or whatever else people want, so we'll give people we'll shuffle off in a minute, but we do have another game to play. Unfortunately, in this season, we can't just draw a line under it here. We are away at Borough next Monday night. We're probably going to do that pod either on the Monday or maybe the Tuesday after the game. Now, Borough are a pretty poor team at the moment. We know this. We know they're barely scoring any goals. We know they're looking now like one of the favourites to go down. But it's a Monday night. It's a long old away trip. We've just seen Arsenal play pretty poorly against a team whose trend in terms of form is a little the other way to Middlesbrough, to say the least. But I don't know. I mean, do we care? What do we think anymore about this game?
I think we'll go and beat Middlesbrough probably comfortably. I think there's a big difference between the two sides, and Middlesbrough will not be up for it in the way Palace were tonight. Aren't Palace's fans great, by the way? So,
well, they're one of those ones that sort of irritate me because of how great they are.
Yeah.
Because that's what everyone always says, aren't Palace's fans great? But
I think
it's a fair enough. It's a fair enough. We may as well be gracious. It's a fair enough point.
I'm not sure that the Riverside will have that sort of backing anyway. And as I say, it will make no difference, but we'll probably, I suspect we will beat them. I think that without too much of a problem.
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to go along with that because despite tonight, I can't see anything. There's got to be a reaction. There's going to be a hell of a week between now and then. I mean, we know what it's going to be like a bit because we've seen previews in previous weeks when things have not gone well. But obviously, this is a cumulative effect now, isn't it? This is just going to get worse and worse until something's said. I mean, there were rumours flying around over the last week or so about the fact there are changes going to be made, that previous players may be getting involved, that there's going to be a look at the structure. But until we actually hear something fundamental, until we actually hear something, people say this is going to happen next season, it's all irrelevant. Until we actually hear that, there's just more gossip and more conjecture and all the rest of it. And I think just more frustration. I think a win will maybe delay things a little bit, but until we have an idea, I don't think people can look forward with any hope until there's some appreciation from the club itself that things need to change and this is what we're going to do. It doesn't mean we'll like what the change they suggest is, but there's got to be something, because at the moment it's just pootling along in a fairly pathetic way, which I think is just demoralising a lot of people, and we don't need that. There's enough in life to get us demoralised. We don't need our football club to be doing the same thing. Right. Well, I don't think we can get any more. I don't think we can do any more with that, can we?
We can't, other than we could possibly just give a prediction on the FA Cup semi-final.
Oh, we'll cover that after the.
Will we be able to? Yes, we will.
Yeah, we'll do it after the Borough game next week. Feel free to do it now if you like and change your mind. But
no, I think I've already said what I think. I don't think a game against Middlesbrough is going to change that.
No, very much not. It's going to be very different games. It's an interesting point you make, though, that obviously there are other teams that might call themselves traditional top 4 teams who are not having great seasons, but none of them are looking quite as abject as we are, I don't think. And I think, or certainly haven't done it as often as we have, and I think maybe there's a difference there. There is that little gap that's there, and it's not there by accident. We could have closed up the gap a bit had we won these games in hand, but it's not looking like we're going to win these games in hand. So I think that gap is going to be quite a true reflection, isn't it? But all right, well, look, we will leave it there. We'll talk about the Borough game next week, and then we'll preview City, and I think it's Leicester is the next league game as well after that. So we'll come back for that next week, and we'll all have a break now, and we'll try and relax and think calming thoughts for the next few days. But for the moment, Pete, thank you very much for your company.
Thank you very much, Matt.
And thank you everyone for listening. Sorry we couldn't make it more fun, but it's not our fault. We're not playing. We might as well be, to be frank. Two middle-aged men in defence may not have. We'd have tried hard. Put it that way. We'd have tried harder than perhaps some of they would have done. Anyway, but thank you very much for listening, and we will be back to speak to you next week. Cheers. Bye bye.